and welcome to this episode of ESI Africa Insights. With me today, I have Tshwanelo Rakaibe, who is the senior researcher at the CSIR's Energy Center. Hello, Tshwanelo.
Good afternoon, Teresa.
Nice to have you here.
Nice to be here as well at the Inlet Africa conference.
So, I'm really curious, what kind of research is the CSIR doing that's got you excited?
In terms of storage?
Well, anything energy related.
There's quite a lot that we're doing, but in terms of storage specifically, I think there's been quite a number of changes that we've seen in the energy landscape since 2012 when the first renewable energy programs were coming online. And year on year since 2012, there's just been an increase across all technologies, but for solar specifically, we have about 9% of our installed capacity coming from solar. And some of the other changes that have happened due to load shedding, households trying to reduce their dependence on Eskom, as well as some of the commercial and industrial sector players also looking to reduce their reliance on Eskom and also reduce their own electricity bills, seeing more and more solar installations that are going on in those market segments of the market as well. And in seeing this increase in the deployment of solar, we've also started to see an increase in the deployment of batteries that go along with it. Because solar, as we know, does have its limitations. It is a variable technology and does need to be paired with these long-lasting, long-duration storage systems such as batteries. SAPVIA, which is the Solar Association, has reported that about 80 to 85% of commercial and industrial users are pairing their solar installations with batteries. 90 to 95% of residential users are also pairing their solar installations with batteries. So really seeing that the momentum in solar is starting to create a momentum in batteries in the country.
That's kind of interesting.
The IRP, of course, we know it hasn't been implemented as was planned, but in the IRP, it is projected that we would need about 2.2 gigs of battery storage capacity by 2030. The Department of Mineral Resources and Energy through the IPP office has procured or will be procuring about 1.7 gigs. So we're on track, hopefully, to reach that by 2030. Eskom's transmission development plan pegs this number a little bit higher at about 6.6 gigs that we would need up to 2032 for stability of the grid. So really seeing growth both in solar installations along with batteries. And so at the CSIR at the moment, we are doing two things as it relates to storage specifically. We have a team of colleagues that are working on developing advanced materials for storage applications. We have developed a prototype with the University of the Western Cape for a 12-volt UPS that's currently being demonstrated. And we're hoping that we can develop these type of materials to be able to support a local manufacturing industry in South Africa for storage devices specifically.
So thinking about that, what would it actually take for us to build it up? Because you're on the research side and you're showing this is a good idea.
Yes.
But how do we actually get to that local battery manufacturing value chain?
So there are quite a number of challenges. One, I think we would have all seen that we've had quite a significant ramp up in the import of these batteries. I mentioned the numbers that we're seeing in terms of growth of installations, but all of those cells, almost all of those cells are being imported. And that means we have a very underdeveloped manufacturing sector in South Africa for these technologies, whether you're talking lithium-ion batteries or the vanadium flow batteries. And some of the challenges that are a barrier for us include the need to have policy certainty and incentives that are going to enable the demand to be there for investors, aspiring manufacturers and assemblers to mobilize their resources to come in South Africa and set up shop. I mentioned the IRP quotes 2.2 gigs by 2030. Eskom's TDP quotes 6.6. Those are two very different numbers. And so if I am an aspiring manufacturer, what number am I guided by when I'm making that investment decision to come set up shop in South Africa? And so there certainly is a need for there to be demand certainty that is consistent and that is implemented. Like I mentioned, the IRP hasn't been implemented as was planned, and there's been a consequence to that stop, start, delay, go, because someone has a factory that is set up, they're incurring costs while we are starting. And so that really makes it difficult for assemblers and manufacturers to set up shop in the country, besides the load shedding challenges. Some of the other challenges would include lack of skills. So South Africa is typically characterized by low-skilled level individuals. And for those high-value activities in these manufacturing value chains, you do need sort of high-level skills. And if I'm unable to plan my investment for putting up the plant, I'm also unable to plan the skills that would service that demand. Financing, which is always going to be a challenge for most businesses, certainly also a challenge that we've come across in the research that we've been doing. And the last one would be we produce quite a lot of the minerals that are required for different segments of the value chain for the manufacturing component. If you look at manganese, globally, we're supplying about 30% of the global demand. Whether you're talking nickel, whether you're talking iron, aluminium, we mine quite a lot of these resources in South Africa, but we're not beneficiating these minerals in South Africa. We're exporting them. And so that also means that we forego the opportunity for realizing the value that can be created from beneficiating those minerals locally. Of course, minerals like nickel are being beneficiated in the country, but they're being used perhaps for different processes like steel, which is still an important input into these value chains. But point being that we produce the raw material, it is exported, and there's a loss in value and opportunity for creating these local industries in the country.
Okay, so speaking local, South Africans do love to recycle. So what do you think of second life batteries and a second life for a solar panel?
Sure, I can be here all day talking about that one. So I mentioned earlier that we've just seen this ramp up in installation of solar, which has created this momentum in storage. And although we see the cost of solar panels sort of decreasing year on year, they are still a significant percentage in terms of cost for the system. And South Africans are not really the richest of people, the bulk of people in South Africa. We have high inequality levels in the country, poverty, unemployment. We're all familiar with those challenges. You can do two things with the solar panels and batteries that are nearing end of life or are perhaps damaged, is either you recycle them or you refurbish. Our recycling facilities in South Africa are still developing. And so the alternative is to refurbish. For things like panels, they have an expected lifetime typically of about 25 years. And the assumption is that it would run for the full 25 years. But what we're seeing is that they're not running for the full 25 years because efficiencies are improving. So they're being replaced. Sometimes they're being damaged. And so not really being utilized up to the end of that lifetime. And that creates an opportunity for refurbishment. The cost of a refurbished panel can be 50 to 70% cheaper than a new panel. And in a country like South Africa, where the average household income is less than 30,000 Rand, but to install a small system would cost you about 145,000 Rand, there's a discussion there for affordability. National Treasury did introduce an incentive that was aimed at trying to improve or encourage the uptake of solar panels in the residential and commercial space. But that really didn't reach my aunt in Matatiela, who doesn't have 145,000 Rand. And so if we do refurbish these panels, it does create an opportunity for improving access for those that are unable to afford, but still have a need. And the same can be said for SMMEs. The Township Entrepreneurial Alliance They estimated that about 64% of township SMMEs had to stop operating due to load shedding. 64% of them cut jobs. And this is in a country where SMMEs contribute to about 59, 60% of economy-wide employment. Only about, I think it's 16 or 19% of SMMEs could actually afford to put in alternative energy supply when there is load shedding. And so also for them, it would be an affordability conversation that enables them to stay in business, sustain the livelihoods that they do. The other benefit that really we could see from establishing a refurbishment industry in South Africa would be that the SMMEs themselves can participate. For you to have a recycling industry established, you need quantities, large quantities of panels. Our collection rates in South Africa are not really high. But the thing with refurbishment is that SMMEs are able to do that because you require lower levels of stock to be able to do the refurbishment. And so there are SMMEs in the country that are already doing refurbishment of panels. And hopefully we can see more given the affordability aspect that I've highlighted.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing with us. It sounds really interesting.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of ESI Africa Insights, and stay tuned for the next one.